cybersecurity maturity model certification, as you can see there, it is setting a framework for how you're measured for handling government information. None of it's new, right? This is just a good framework so that way the Department of Defense and Department of War officials can actually reasonably oversee all of us and how we handle their information. Again, federal contract information, that's information provided by or generated for government under a contract that isn't intended for public release. It's when you start aggregating, okay, well, what is the government buying from you? How frequently are they buying for it? What costs are they paying? That's when you get into that FCI realm. Contract deliverables, correspondence actually with a contracting officer that isn't CUI it very well falls into FCI if it's not already CUI. So if your contract mentions handling, storing, or transmitting government furnished technical data, drawings, or specifications, assume CUI unless a contracting officer is confirmed otherwise. Even if you're not a government contractor, these standards are still important to follow. As I mentioned with FCI, these 15 controls are otherwise just good practice that likely your cybersecurity liability policy demands you follow as well. So ultimately, cost one, lost revenue. This is probably the easiest one to understand and get through, right? If you're not CMMC compliant, or if you don't attest to the fact that you can handle government information appropriately, you're not gonna win a bid. Next cost is kind of what I was talking about with that FCA thing. Legal exposure. False Claims Act turns paperwork into liability. If you say you're going to do this, congratulations, you have to do it. CMMC is what allows you to reasonably state, look, I followed the 110 standards, right? If you say you did, and then it turns out you didn't, well, then now the government can collect 3 times the damages based on that false statement. Breach impact, delay costs, right? So these things, the quiet costs that add up. For all reasonable, you put in all controls, you're doing the best you can, and a breach still happens, an incident, if you will. Well, that's going to be expensive. You still have to report to the DoD. Depending on how things happen, you may or may not be fined in some amount. And the whole time you're doing this, your team or the team that you have working on your behalf is doing something that they weren't otherwise going to be doing. So you have that lost productivity. And then more likely than not, you have some heavy reputational damage that may follow you into the next bid, may impact the option you're exercising. Number 4, the cost of waiting kind of ties into cost of one, but it's even more. Everything's just going to get more expensive, right? So remediation costs more than a planned program. So let's say you do delay and then you have an incident. Well, now you're reacting on your back foot versus kind of leaning into what things could be. Even for non-DoD contractors, you got to protect your customers' information. These are basic steps that need to be taken to make sure things are secure. Now, the good news is, of course, IPC is really good at this. We have over 20 years experience doing it. Where does it go, right? We're an RPO and we can help you. So one, your cloud environment, that has to qualify. So when we think about that marketing tool, right, that SaaS marketing plugin that happened to the hotel, well, they need to be compliant, right? So, and this is where a lot of folks miss it and they don't realize, okay, these are all the tools that I'm using to handle my information. Is it ready, right? Standard Microsoft 365 isn't that, in and of itself isn't compliant. Standard Google Workspace or Dropboxes can be a problem. Ordinary email and file shares, all of those things are things that you're going to need to bump up to make sure that they map to the appropriate level of CUI control.